Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Mind Split Cafe. I am your co-host, Matt Palmquist, and obviously Chris is not here today. He had a scheduling conflict, but I am so happy that our guest, Alexis Royal, is here with us today. She is a BSN/RN registered nurse, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Alexis for how long now, Alexis? Like over 10 years, right? Like
Over 10, probably 13.
yeah,
Yeah,
13
been a
years,
while.
right? Our paths
Mhm.
crossed a dozen years ago plus, in a whole different vertical. Like we won't even get into that, but we've known each other and we've kept in touch. We've been friends for over 12 years. And I'm so glad that she is coming on to the show to share her story and what exactly she does now with BRC Recovery. So, Alexis, thank you so much for being on the show and welcome to Mind Split Cafe.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, without going into detail and how we know each other, right? Obviously, we worked with the Austin Toros a long
Yeah,
time ago, right? When we were young and just
I
full of
like our
energy.
story. Why
Huh?
can't we share how we met?
Okay, well, yeah, let's do it. So I was working with the basketball ops for the basketball side of the G League, San Antonio Spurs G League team in Austin, known as the Austin Toros. And Alexis, you were doing what?
I was dancing. So I was one of the Awesome Toros dancer.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
so we would our paths would cross like on game days or certain events. I know that you and I went to certain events, like just community events where they had to have a player or somebody from basketball ops or a dancer or whatever. So you and I did a lot of events together, because they also paid us extra to do it. So that was always great, right? But
Yep.
we just always have struck a chord, and there's just the chemistry. And you were like one of the fondest people that I remember from my
Mhm.
time in that, during that time with the Spurs. So it's so funny that now we're here talking about mental wellness and
Mhm.
mental health, and we we tapped you and we're like, hey, I know somebody, Chris. Let's bring in Alexis, and you were so gracious to say yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel like our history is important, right? Like our story, our individual story is so important. It's part of our journey. It's part of what makes us us. And so that year, I mean, it's funny because it's like we know each other, but it's, at the same time, like you don't know exactly what's behind closed doors, right? Like you didn't
No,
know what I was going through. I don't know your personal struggles. Like
yeah,
we're showing up to do a job, to perform, and to put on this like
show,
external, yeah,
yeah.
identity that we want have to show the world, but also like there's a struggle behind that, right?
Yeah, and I'd like for you to, and I'm glad you are kind of making us share this story, right? Because you're right. You didn't know exactly what I was going through internally, right? And
Mhm.
I had my struggles, but what was it? And you've shared this off camera several times to me, but if you'd like, if you want to share what exactly you were going through that kind of like helped you get to where you are such a great advocate for BRC now,
Yeah.
so please do kind of share what was going on with you during that time 12, 13 years ago.
So you know me, Matt. I'm an open book. Like I really live by when your mess becomes your message.
Hmm.
And for me, that has been important because it's been a place that I've been able to help a lot of other women.
Hmm.
And I just appreciate, authenticity and transparency because in a world where everything is so social media driven and we're
Hmm.
trying to be something that we're not and not showing
Hmm.
the full scope of the story, there's this comparison culture and it makes it really hard to have like true connection and authentic
Hmm.
happiness. And so yeah, so it's important for me to be transparent and I'm not ashamed of my story. My journey is my journey and we all have our own individual struggles. But yeah, no, so
I
that
think your journey
first,
is amazing, by the way, before you share it. Like I know it,
yeah.
but I think your story is one to be proud of. And I think
Thank
it's an
you.
amazing story.
I
So
appreciate that, Matt.
yeah.
Yeah. So the first season, so I danced for the they were the Austin Spurs the first season I danced for them, and I danced for them 2 more seasons later, and they then became the San Antonio Spurs. Or
Mm-hmm.
sorry, the
They
Austin.
were Toros. Now they're the Austin Spurs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm getting it confused. Yes,
Yeah.
they were the Toros, and then they became the Austin Spurs the second time
Mm-hmm.
I danced for them. And that first season I danced for them, I wasn't sober. So my personal story is that of recovery. So I've been in sobriety for 10 years. I don't drink, I don't use
Congratulations.
any illicit drugs. There's some people out there that can totally drink and they are fine. And I have learned throughout my experience that I am not one of those people. And so my first year on the Toros was significant for many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
For one, I had started using, when I was 14 years old, and that extended till I was 24. So a good 10 years. And it started off as like your typical weed, alcohol, and then it got worse and worse and
Yeah.
worse
And
throughout the
progressively
years.
just
And,
kind
and
of,
then I went, and got into meth really bad. And that was like a whole journey. But when I was dancing for the Toros, I had walked through that piece of my addiction, and I was like a weekend warrior, if you will. So I was drinking and partying really hard on the weekends, but like trying to sustain some type of like normalcy during the week. So
okay.
school, nursing school, prereqs, co-reqs, um,
And
the
just
foros.
so people know, you were going through nursing school at the time when you were doing this weekend warrior kind of like.
Not very well, not very well at all. Like,
But I
I was
remember
taking
when we were working together, you would always I would bump into you or whatever at the arena or in the backstage or in the halls or whatever at events, and you would always say that you were in nursing school. And so
yeah.
I found that always to be like inspiring, because you were like, okay, here's this really, really awesome person. She's got a great head on her shoulders. She's got determination and grit, and she's going through nursing school. She loves to dance, so she's doing this for a side money, but she's just doing it for the love of dancing. I never suspected that you were
Yeah.
doing meth or like during this weekend warrior kind of facade. Like I would have never
I
guessed that.
know people, when I tell people my story, they're like, I just feel like they don't even believe me. But that actually brings up a really good point, right? Because addiction and alcoholism is such a corroding thread through so many people's lives and in their family units. And I had amazing parents. Like growing up, I was that kid that was very ambitious. I was
Mhm.
naturally athletic. School, I struggled with, but I worked really hard to make good grades. I always worked really hard in whatever I did, right? When I was
Mhm.
12, I went to the Junior Olympics for tennis. I was second in the nation for singles and doubles. And like I always had, well, like I always was just very ambitious, right? And then and I worked really hard. And whenever I found drinking, because that was really the first thing that I found, there was like huge release of responsibility and pressure that I put on myself. And it was a freedom that I hadn't experienced before, where it's just like I don't have anything to worry about. I don't have to be responsible. I don't have to be the best at everything. There's not a
Mhm.
competitiveness to me at all times. And it was just like this complete presence is how I felt when I first drank, right? And then that's what they say, they call it like chasing the dragon, like chasing that feeling of
Of
serenity is kind of
euphoria.
what,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And what age was this, Alexis, when your first drink happened?
um Freshman in high school.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was 15.
So that was about 4 or 5 years ago, right?
Might have been
Because you're
even eighth
21 now.
grade. Yeah, right. Right. I was about to say I wish, but I don't really wish. I don't want to relive those days. I just I'm doing great at 35. I think this is a good time for me.
Well, you don't look a day over 36, so there
Thanks.
you go. You're
Oh,
fine.
thanks, Matt. I appreciate that.
Okay,
Well,
so you have your first drink at 35, at 35 at your freshman year, and
mhm.
then and then you're still ambitious, you're doing the weekend warrior thing, and
I'm kind of still ambitious, right? Like at
no,
that
you're
point,
yeah, I'm not saying that you aren't anymore, but I'm just
yeah,
saying that I'm just trying to get in that time frame of
yeah,
what you were going through at that moment, right? And so you were chasing the dragon then, right? You were 21, 22, because I met you 13 years ago. So you
I
would have
was,
been what, 24-ish, 23-ish?
I think I was 22 that first season
Okay.
because I
So
got sober at 24
okay, yeah,
and
yeah.
I was sober the second season.
Okay. So
So
I remember I remember I had no idea going what you were going through that first year, right? When you and
yeah,
I were working together. And then I remember seeing on Facebook that you said, "Hey, I'm going to do this for myself. I'm going to get clean. I'm going to AA and I'm going to get sober."
yeah.
That was the first time that I had ever heard. I didn't even know you had a problem, and then you came out and admitted it, and now it's 10 years later, you've been dry since then, clean and
Well,
sober.
not dry. There's a difference.
Okay,
So
please.
there's dry
Okay.
and there's living in recovery, right? And
Okay.
dry is for the most part, what happens is if you take, so people use alcohol and drugs as a coping mechanism, right? So
Yes.
alcohol and drugs were not the source of my problem. It was a coping skill to my internal condition, to how I felt. Like I used it to cope with life, right? And so
Okay.
if you're dry, all you do is you take the drinks and the drugs away from you, but you're still left with that inner turmoil, those like inner demons, those character
Yes.
defects, and like the ways that you show up to life that maybe aren't healthy with yourself and with others. And
Okay.
so living in a life of recovery or sobriety is really whatever program you choose to use, but having
Hmm.
some type of source where you are learning, how to not be codependent, how you are learning how to love yourself, you're journaling, you're meditating, you have these coping skills that are replacing
You're
your
finding
drinking
different
alone.
outlets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
So there's a
Well,
difference because a dry drunk can act like a drunk still just without the alcohol. But somebody in recovery, I mean, not to say that we're perfect because there's
yeah.
definitely times in my recovery where I just haven't practiced the principles and probably
Hmm.
acted like a dry drunk, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, let's talk. I mean, let's talk about a couple of outlets that obviously you've replaced the alcohol and the drugs, right? And so,
Yes.
what are um what are some of the outlets that you personally have found that's helped you to keep that 10 years that you've been practicing,
Yeah.
the recovery? Like what are things that you do? Is it journaling? Is it you've got the
Yeah.
cutest little boy? Like, is it
Yeah.
spending
He's,
time with him? Like what,
mhm.
shout out to Asher. Like, what is it that you
Yeah.
do
Little
that,
man.
yeah, are
He's a
you baking
mess.
cookies for his little league team? Like, what are
Oh
you
yeah, I don't have
doing?
my life that together. I show up and that's about it. um Well, I think first of all, the question, so the way I got sober is I started work. My mom put me in touch with a life coach,
Okay.
and I wasn't sober then, but I was doing the weekend warrior stuff and I was kind of holding it together, but barely keeping my head above water. And I was just like, okay, I know my full potential and I know I'm like overly exerting myself to the point where I'm trying so hard, but I don't feel like I'm reaping the benefits in the sense that like I'm not truly enjoying anything, right? Because I'm just trying
Mm-hmm.
to like paddle, keep my head above water at this point.
Yeah.
And so one of the things she had me do is she had me create a list of hobbies and things that I love that maybe I don't engage in anymore because I'm too busy drinking when I don't have work or school or dance.
Yeah.
Well, actually, at that point, or there wasn't any dance. And so, we came up with a game plan for me. And the top of that game plan was how can I get back involved in dance? Because I
Okay.
had, just danced in high school on my dance team.
Yeah.
But for me, dance brings me just that like inner peace and just joy and happiness and that true of like I'm living in the moment and I don't care what people think about me. I'm just enjoying
Yeah.
myself, you know?
You really really great at it, by the way. I
Thank
mean,
you.
just somebody that's seen you dance, like
Yeah.
you're really great at it.
Well,
So
I
yeah,
appreciate it. Now
yeah.
I dance and my knees and my sciatic hurts, but I still try.
That's that's that old age, right?
I know.
That's what we're feeling, right? I
Yeah.
can't play basketball anymore either, so I totally get it.
Okay. So you know the struggle.
Yeah, I know the story. It is real. It is real. So yeah.
So that first year on Toros, what it looked like for me was before that in my addiction, I was always super codependent. So I was in a 5-year relationship, then in a 2-year relationship, and back to back because I didn't know how to love myself.
Hmm.
And so I always had to have somebody around me that was reassuring that I could have like draw comfort from or
Hmm.
compliments from because I didn't feel it for myself, you know?
Yeah.
And so being on the Toros was the first time that I was really put in a place where I was surrounded by a community of women, which became a theme throughout my sobriety and still is today, that I'm surrounded by like-minded women who are on, who have the same values as I do, in the sense that like I want to be a better person. I want to have a connection to my higher power. I want to help other women, whatever
Yeah.
that looks like, whether it's sobriety or in other some capacity. But it was the first time I had a community of women around me, was dancing for the Austin Spurs. And so I learned how
Hmm.
to build relationships with them. And that was detrimental to my sobriety moving forward because there were so many times throughout the years where it's, I wouldn't say so many times, there's a handful of times because the promises that I received is like the obsession to want to drink and use drugs has been removed. But there has been times, that, we all walk through darkness and I needed them to help me through that.
You needed somebody to help uplift. Like you needed
Yeah,
that support, and these
absolutely.
women were that support system for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that story amazing, and I've known it for a while, right? Because you and I are friends, but I'm so thankful that you're able to share this story on this platform because we don't know how many people you could help just by if someone listens to this episode,
Yeah.
right? But which leads me to my next question, right? So you've taken it a step further now, and you are the Central Texas outreach specialist for BRC Recovery,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So you've taken it to another level. Like you've realized, like, hey, I got help. This is the support system that I needed to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And now you are doing that for so many other people, whether it be women, men, whoever. Like you're doing this on another level. Kind of talk about what you're doing with BRC and how you're helping hundreds of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my journey into the industry actually started off as a nurse. And so I
Hmm.
was a nurse for 8 years. And the last 6 of those, I worked in acute psych and addiction medicine. And naturally was just drawn to it based on my family's history, because that's a whole nother thing. And then my
We'll
personal
bring you back for another episode, right?
God, I think we'll need like a saga, need more than one episode. Um, so I worked in acute psych and addiction medicine as a nurse and was naturally drawn to it. And then, I was like, okay, this is 6 months ago. I was like, I'm going to be turning 35 this year. And I love nursing. Like I still absolutely love it. I'm passionate about it. I had the most incredible experiences with my patients. I have seen people like just miracles happen, right? People who've come in
Fantastic.
to
Yeah.
detox just completely broken. And then, I'll see them out in the community however many years later, and they're like, I'm still sober. And
That's
remember when we had that
amazing.
conversation about God, and like it was very impactful. And now I work in recovery. And so it's just a really beautiful journey. But then yeah, so I wanted to try something new. I feel like I have like a natural adventurous spirit. And so I just like to experience everything. And so I started looking for basically business development jobs in
Okay.
treatment. And I was hired on by BRC Recovery to be their outreach specialist. And so, with my experience as a nurse, my focus is really to get in to hospitals or work with primary care physicians and other medical facilities to be like, hey, this is our program. We have these services. If you know of anybody, if you have any patients that come in, maybe in an overdose or complications from alcoholism that really needs, detox or residential treatment or the aftercare component. And I tell them too, because this is true, right? Like my job is not to just get people in the door for my facility. Like I
Yeah.
love my program. I am so passionate about my program and what we do. And I know that we change lives. But at the end of the day, like we are not the only program. And sometimes the willingness to even go into treatment isn't there. And then
Hmm.
sometimes it comes and then it's so fleeting and it goes. So if they just need community resources, like, hey, I need a list of AA meetings or NA meetings, or I need a therapist, and my job is not just to get people through the door at BRC. My job
Hmm.
is to
Is
really,
to help people.
yeah, to help people at
Yeah.
the end of the day,
So what is a good day for you? Like, I mean, not just personally, but like, there's everybody has different jobs, right?
Yeah.
Whether, but and everybody has milestones, or there's an ROI or whatever. If it's a salesperson, you hit your goal for the year or
Mhm.
whatever the milestone is. What is a good day for Alexis? What does a good day look like for you where you're like totally like just like, hey, I am on the right track,
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll give you an example. The other day, a case manager from a hospital called me and she had a patient there that was willing, possibly willing to go to treatment. And if I could come in and talk to her. And that is definitely a part of my job as a nurse that I miss, having that much patient interaction.
Hmm.
But like getting to be able to go in and speak to the patients is huge, right? And so she was 52-year-old woman, has never been to treatment before, but had a brand new grandbaby that she wanted to be a part of his life. And, the family set boundaries with her, like, you got to get sober. That was, and
Yeah.
rightfully so. And I think that's great because that thrust her into having that slight willingness to even have a conversation. And she couldn't come, she didn't end up being able to come to us just because of insurance gap. But I partner with other facilities that I vetted and that I trust and believe in. And this other facility I'd actually been a nurse at, and so I was able to get her into the other program. And that was the first time in 52 years she had ever gone to treatment.
Wow.
To me,
And it's
that's a
because of
win,
Alexis. Yeah.
and I just think that's so beautiful. And then
That
of
is
course,
beautiful.
yeah, if they come to BRC, then I love that just as much. So
But yeah, of course, you want them to come through your doors, right? Just because,
yeah.
that's who pays, your mortgage, right? But
Well,
like,
and I work for an incredible company and we have a beautiful program, and I just
yeah,
know that it is extremely
but the
beneficial.
fact that you helped this woman, 52 years old, right?
Hmm.
No telling how long she's had this addiction, right? But
Yeah.
now
Long
she
time.
realized that she needed the
Hmm.
treatment, or she needed the help. And you are the person that walks through that door that says, hey, I can help you, whether it not be at BRC or whatever, just because of insurance, but you were the one that helped her get into a program.
Yeah.
That has to feel so gratifying. Like that
It.
just
Hmm.
you've got to be over the moon on that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a yeah, good phrase for it. So
Yeah.
it's like a
So
feeling, like you get it like right here, like in your chest and your throat, and you're just like overwhelmed with joy or like excitement for someone else in their journey. So I think that's a good.
I can see how you're lighting up right now. Like
Uh-huh.
you were just so happy that you were able to help, right? Now,
Hmm.
how many, obviously addiction, and there's so many stories of addiction. How many good days do you usually string together in a week? Like, is this happening every day, or is this kind of like a once a month type thing, or like how often are you helping these type of
The
people?
industry's
Feel this.
cyclical, right? It's very cyclical. People are more willing to go to treatment, October through November, December on the colder months. During the summer and the holidays, people don't want to be in treatment. So they're
Hmm.
usually, I mean, honestly, I would have wanted to go this summer because it was so hot down here in Texas. It's like 105 for like 90 days straight. I'm be like, please take me, take
Put
me
me in
to
some air
treatment.
conditioning and
Oh, it's
I'll do some
brutal.
meetings. Yeah.
It is brutal, but it's cyclical. So it depends on the season. It depends, some months you're busier and some months you're not.
Yeah. It's
Um,
like with any vertical, right?
but
It kind of goes up and down, right?
yeah,
So,
but
well,
every day we're at least doing outreach. And so, for example, last week I went to San Antonio and one of our therapists spoke at the peer support training for our first responders, so police, fire, and EMS.
mm-hmm.
And so, they put one of the fire department psychologists put together a training, I believe it's quarterly training, don't quote me on that, but where, people come and they speak to our first responders about the importance of like self-care, mental health, PTSD, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're constantly doing outreach in the sense that I go with my therapist, I get to talk one-on-one with the officers, with the firefighters, and that's just a cool experience in itself. And I actually got to go give lunch to the cadets, which are the firefighters in training, and they're set to graduate in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And they needed an extra person for their role play training. And so I got
Okay.
to be the drunk, decompensated woman, which I played amazingly.
So now, now you're nominated for, are you nominated for a Razzie
Yeah, I
or,
almost said a Grammy, but I'm pretty sure that's music. See, I don't
no,
know.
Grammys are music. Yeah. Yeah. You would have got a Razzie or you would have got an Emmy or an Oscar, right?
Yeah.
Those are the actor ones. So not only are you a recovery specialist, you're an actress, right?
Yeah.
So okay. Did they critique your performance? Did they say
Oh, they said I did amazing.
really?
I did great for improv, for first time improv
Is there
work.
any video of this? Can we get video to share on our
I don't
social?
know if they took video. I don't think they did, but I'll ask Roy.
Yeah, if you do, text it to me and we'll share it. Be like,
Uh-huh.
this is what she does. This is what.
Yeah, I had a fake glass of bourbon. It was tea. It was just sweet
Okay,
tea, no bourbon in it. So
of
I
course.
was drinking that and giving him a hard time for listening to Lil Uzi. Although I like,
You like Lil Uzi?
yeah, I do. But I was just harassing him because they're like 20-year-old, soon to be firefighters, and
Yeah. Oh
so.
wow. That not only is she recovery specialist, she does acting on the side and she
Mhm.
dances. You are an amazing soul that is helping so many people. And I can't begin to say how much I appreciate you and our friendship and what you're doing for the community because you are a pillar of strength. So thank you, Alexis.
Thank you. Well, it takes a village, man. It takes a village. I have an amazing team behind me.
So, well, in closing, if someone needs to get in touch with you, how can they find you if they've got loved ones or them themselves need help? How do they contact Alexis where you can kind of help them?
Yeah,
What's your contact
absolutely.
information?
I can leave my phone number and my email address, and that's the best reach me.
Yeah,
I have my
yeah,
phone on me at all times.
yeah. Text me your email,
Okay.
your work email, and your office number, or whatever
Like we
number you
weren't
want to
supposed to come
leave,
up with
and
something
we'll
this
make sure
clean.
that we get that
Like something happened.
in the captions so that way
Yeah.
somebody
And
can
I will
go
also put our company website and
please.
admissions line.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
always,
that'll be fantastic.
yeah. And people are welcome to call me too if they just have, I have some people that have like, hey, I'm going through something. I've been drinking more than normal lately. What do you think? I can like hopefully just help them process that information and let them kind of figure it out for themselves, but ask them the relevant questions,
Now
or
let me
maybe.
I'm probably gonna go down a road that's gonna venture us into another 20 minutes of conversation, right? But
Uh-huh.
what is it? How do you distinguish the blurred line to where,
Mhm.
hey, someone just needs to kind of let off some steam and they just need a night full of whiskey, or it is becoming a real problem and this is something that needs to be identified and be treated. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you distinguish that blurred line of, hey, he's just letting off some steam,
Yeah.
or this is beginning to be a real problem?
Well, and sometimes it can be hard, right? Because our society is so culturally driven towards alcohol, alcohol, alcohol. We have to have alcohol for every type of social interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can get confusing because it's like, am I just like doing what our culture does, or do I have a problem? And
Yeah.
for me, and everyone's story is different, right? Because being in sobriety for a long time, I've heard a lot of stories. For me, the first time it's like I immediately wanted more. I immediately wanted more. Some people, it's a progressive thing where maybe at one point they, you know, drank socially, and then maybe they had a death of a loved one and they started drinking heavily. And when they tried to dial it back, they had almost like crossed that line of no return because it can change the brain chemistry and the way your body reacts to alcohol. And so for me, it's like I was experiencing consequences of my alcoholism, and even when I wanted to dial back or I wanted to quit, I couldn't, you know.
Mm.
And so it's like I those consequences, but yet I couldn't change anything about the way I drank, even when I wanted to. And so I think that's usually a pretty clear indication that, hey, there might be a problem here, and maybe I need to explore that more. If I'm having if people around you are saying, hey, you've been drinking a lot, that's a
Dial
pretty
back.
big red flag, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're
So
starting to feel guilty about your drinking,
yeah.
that's
So
kind of
when
a
you
red flag too.
just when you were doing the weekend warrior thing, were you cognizant of like, hey, this is becoming exhausting. Like I probably should dial back a little bit. Like I don't want to do this anymore. But then it was kind of, you would cross that line to where it was like there was nothing you could do, that you just craved it. Is that the am I
Well, by
understanding
even
that
at that
correctly?
point, I had gone to a few treatment facilities. So I went to my first rehab in high school. And then out of high school, I went to my second one. And then by then, I think I had already been to three. And so I already knew where I stood personally with alcohol and drugs. And so I was just trying so hard to control it. And I think that's another red flag, right? Like normal people who have a normal reaction to alcohol, they don't have to like work to control how much they drink. They
Mm-hmm.
can drink a glass of wine, maybe start on the second, and there's a little bit left, and they put it down on the table and they don't think twice about it. They just go to bed, brush teeth, go to bed.
Yeah.
People that have a tendency to be or are alcoholics, it's like I might have had a night where I didn't drink that whole glass of wine, but I can guarantee you it drove me crazy that I couldn't drink that whole glass of wine. I had to really work to not drink that glass of wine, and I obsessively thought about it until I went to bed, you know? Like that's
Wow.
not a normal reaction.
And that finished glass, did that turn into, hey, there's more in that bottle? I should probably finish that bottle.
Yeah, probably usually. For me
Wow.
personally.
Wow. That is that my my grandma, she was 50 years sober. And she, I remember being 7, 8 years old, and she took me to to AA meetings. And at 7, 8 years old, I didn't know. I thought my grandma was like a boss, right? She could take her grandson to a meeting, like she was controlling
Yeah.
the meeting. So that was the first time I ever had donut holes, and uh
Coffee?
no,
Like that's not coffee at 7.
yeah, no, I'm not a coffee stunts your growth, so I don't drink coffee, right?
Well,
But
clearly you had no coffee your
yeah,
entire
I've
life because
never
you're
had
like 10 feet tall.
coffee. Yeah, but the little cars, the Hot Wheels cars, like
Oh.
that was Hot Wheels and donut holes. I knew that, kind of like Pavlov dog, right? If I
Uh-huh.
go to a meeting with grandma, I'm getting Hot Wheels and I'm getting donut holes. But I had no idea that where she was going. She was going to these meetings on
Hmm.
a nightly basis, and she doing her best to stay sober. She
Did
did
she
for
stay
50
sober?
years. She did until she
Good.
passed away several years ago. But when she passed, she was 50 years sober.
Wow. That's
Yeah. So
amazing.
I'm really proud of my grandma.
That's
That's my mom's mom. So
that's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. That's
So
amazing.
I'm sure it's a struggle every day for any addict, whether it be alcohol or drugs. And I don't know. what
Yeah.
that's like.
Well,
But I admire anybody that's going through it, just because the strength that they have. It's a strength that
well,
you can't really judge. Like, you can't do, you can't do a test like, hey, I can do, you know, 5 chin-ups, or 37 bench press, or whatever. There's no way to measure strength of the mind where you're like, I'm going to put that glass down and I'm not going to pick it up.
yeah,
That's a strength that can't be measured, so
yeah.
kudos to anybody that's dealing with that.
Well, and I think I hear what you're saying. I think there's a slight misconception, because I think if you're not dry and like you're working some type of program that fulfills you, you don't have that daily struggle, right? Like there's periods of your sobriety, like especially for me in early sobriety, that were harder, right? Because I'm trying to formulate a whole new life, new
Mm-hmm.
habits, a new way of living. And that takes time. Habits take time to develop and grow and become part of just your experience and daily living.
Mm-hmm.
But um, if the promises that were given to me was that like I would be able to live a life where I don't obsessively think about alcohol and drugs. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the freedom that I've had, the blessing of experiencing over my last 10
You
years.
experience
Doesn't
that
mean
now.
this,
That's
yeah,
that's glorious. That's fantastic.
yeah.
You are an amazing soul, and I thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Mind Split Cafe. Alexis, you are welcome back anytime you want. We are going to have you back, and I just can't say enough about you, that I admire you so much, and you've just been a wonderful, wonderful guest, and thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, Matt. I do. You have a light to you. Absolutely.
I
I'm
I
very
try.
grateful.
I try to have a light. I
Mhm.
try to have a light. But thank you so much. We'll see you soon, guys. Tune in next week for another great episode of Mind Split Cafe, and we will see you next week. Thanks, Alexis.
Bye. Thank you.
Like, we weren't supposed to come up with something this clean. Like, something happened.